I'm Rick Murphy, CEO and founder of Cogent Growth Partners. If you're a technology services provider or an MSP thinking about growth, acquisitions, and how to achieve a realistic liquidity strategy or an eventual exit, this show's for you. This is Cogent Conversations.
So let's talk about the myth of loyalty. So why is it possible? Yeah. Why is it possible that clients after 10 to 20 years will still leave an MSP?
You know, I got to tell you, it's a real thing. I was actually just talking to a client today. I've got a call I've got to do later this afternoon with a candidate company that we've been doing some modeling on. And in the middle of the modeling process, his number one client went poof.
Wow.
Number one client. And it's a fairly small company. Let's call it $2 million round number revenue company who's got a client concentration, but we all knew he had a client concentration. 30% of his business walked out the door, gone. And it's devastating. It's devastating for him. It probably, I don't think we're going to be able to do a deal. It's just going to make it really hard to come up with some economics that's going to make that work. Although, you know, losing the key client, I mean, there's plenty left and they love him, so that still might work, but the economics are going to change, right? So, you know, there's so many places we can go with this. So let me jump around a little bit. So we hear all the time, boy, I've got the best clientele. You know, every MSP, you ask 1,000 people in a room, raise your hands who's got the best customer service, and they're all going to raise their hands and say, yes, I've got the best customer service. And, you know, the adage of you're only as good as your last service call. True, agreed, you know, right? Your last service call is going to tell the tale. But I think what's going on is, you know, people get older, people get sick, things happen. We have a deal that just went away. It's going to go to a different buyer. Again, we work with candidate companies and we help buyers find and meet interesting companies to buy, right? That's what we do for a living. And the company put an LOI on the table.
Letter of interest.
The letter of interest, letter of interest, and letter of intent, right?
I'm sorry, intent.
That's okay. Indication of interest, letter of intent. Indication of interest is a little bit lighter. Letter of intent is a little stronger. So it was a letter of intent. And week and a half later, I get a phone call from the CFO that they fired the CEO.
Wow.
After putting down a letter of intent, It wasn't signed yet, but the CEO got changed out. And, you know, he had been there for a period of time. It was a bit of a turnaround, and they wanted to be acquisitive also to grow the company. And we've had to put the account on hiatus because they don't have a CEO. So how do you recruit people to want to become part of your company if there's nobody at the helm? But stuff happens, right? And so in that particular case, let's say it was just a customer of a candidate company, and they're thinking about doing a transaction with each other. And the CEO of one of their customers gets changed out, or maybe they got sick or something happened, they moved on. It changes the dynamic at that client. And then what happens next? The new guy comes in or the new gal comes in, and you know, they might have their own favorite IT company. They might not believe in IT at all. They might want to take it in-house. Things happen. So I think one of the things we've seen is that, you know, people, brag is the right word, but rightfully so, proud of the fact that they've got long-lived customer relationships. But I think the thing to think about is not taking them for granted. We have seen a trend in the last 24 months. And actually, the reason I brought up the other clients, we were talking with another client of ours this morning. It was a private equity company. And I said, hey, you know, we've been just seeing a lot of key customer losses and in deals that we're working on. This is like the 5th deal in the past 9 months where there's been a key customer loss, like a real serious, not necessarily a number one customer, 3 number one customers though, in 3 different deals.
Wow.
That is not chance. Something's going on. And actually he said, they've been seeing it too, and they've been talking to their other people. And I'm going to start doing a little bit of surveys on this. And hey, if you know my email address, rick@cogentmergers.com, you email me and you talk about this. If you want to talk about this, you email me. Let's talk about this, because we're seeing a trend in the space where customer losses are becoming a thing, and for whatever reason. So that's the big picture. We're really definitely seeing it, certainly in the last 24 months, maybe more so in the last 12. Not going to call it geopolitical. I don't think that's it at all. It's not the world. It's you've got a long-lived customer relationship, and are you taking that customer relationship for granted?
What false assumptions do you think MSPs make about loyal customers?
That they're going to always be loyal, and they're always going to be there, and they're not going to go away. And again, do you take them for granted? Or you probably still service them like you would service them, but you've known Bob forever, and Bob's your guy there, whether it's the CEO or not. And then Bob moves on. Bob changes his lifestyle. He retires. Whatever might happen. We haven't dug that deep to find out why. It's not really our purview, and a lot of these customers probably wouldn't share that with us anyways. But the fact of the matter, we're seeing the results of it, and we're not the only ones seeing the results of it. So the idea that you need to do stuff to make sure that you really know what's going on with your customers, because you're assuming, right? And you know what assume means, so we don't have to go there. But you're assuming that this is this wonderful relationship that's going to keep going. And I got to tell you, from Cogent's perspective now, when we look at transactions, people say, well, all my customers have been with me forever, and starting to scare us a little bit. Like, when's the last time you had them out to dinner and found out what's going on with their life? And are they getting a divorce, or just anything? I'm just picking stuff out of the air. But, when is the last time you really got to know your customer again? Right. So, it might be more about get to know your customer again, and we talk to our customers all the time. And we're constantly looking at different kinds of transactions. So our stuff is pretty sticky in that regard. But, sometimes when we make a transaction happen, they closed a deal, and it's going to take them a while to recharge their financial batteries and get some more money to put to work, and to integrate the company they just bought. It takes time, things like that. Just a really interesting factoid. And it's worth talking about. I mean, if you're out there and you're listening to this, make sure that your top 10 customers are as sticky as you think they are, and that you've talked to them and you took them to dinner and you've got to know them and continue to get to re-know them again, or get to know the new people around them again, or what their circumstances are, just so you have familiarity. Don't just trust that they're renewing the SOWs all the time, or they got a new MSA, they just signed up for a new 3-year agreement. Okay, but if it's got a 90-day out, then it's really a 90-day agreement, right? And it might have a change of control clause in it, where just a contract is only as good as your relationship. And check the customer relationship part. Don't rely on the contract. When we buy a deal, the contracts are indicative of your relationship, right? And you've got a contractual obligation, but the moral obligation, or just the ability to service that customer, that's probably the wrong way to put it, moral obligation, but the all the stuff, that the relationship part of that, the relationship obligation can change over time. And I think people take that for granted. I think that's what we're learning from this.
You think there's some early signs MSPs can pick up that denote like a safe client may actually be at risk?
So another deal that I'm working on, we'll see if it closes or not, because there's a bunch of stuff going on with that one, where there were client relationships that were not divulged as they probably should have been in a previous attempt to close the transaction. And there was less than, let's say obscure stuff going on with customers, and that was not known to the buyer. And they did discover some information prior to closing that made them rethink whether they wanted to close or not. And they discovered that they, in fact, the seller, in fact, put forward a watch list that they had been keeping on clients at risk, which were literally said watch list at risk customers. So they weren't sure that they were going to renew or not. Which, again, if you're truthful with yourself, if you run if you run an MSP, you run any kind of business, but if you're truthful with yourself, if they're going to renew or not. In your heart of hearts, again, the customer relationship part of that, are they going to renew or not? And again, it comes down to customer service and all kinds of other things. But, again, they just got a new CEO. They just got a new CTO. They got a new CIO. Things happen. Things change. Stuff goes on over time. So why were they on the watch list, and why didn't you disclose that to us before closing? That's interesting, right? And then they had a canceled and offboarding list, which was not disclosed prior to closing.
They canceled an offboarding list.
They have a canceled and offboarding list of customers. So there's a list of customers that had already canceled, they put in notice, and we're in the process of offboarding, which takes months, sometimes a year. It takes a while. And that's a good way to run a business and be helpful to let them offboard and what have you, and do it properly, especially if it's cyber related to other reasons, but certainly just about any customer. That happens, stuff happens. But golly gee whiz, that would have been nice to know before closing. So they kind of found out about it in the not happiest way they found out about it, and it wasn't disclosed. And the deal still might happen. I won't know for another week probably, but we don't retrade. We're not retraders, but it did retrade because obviously there's things there with revenue and risk changed because of and a little bit of trust needed to be rebuilt as well. And there's a lot of circumstance around this. It wasn't a management issue. It was an ownership issue. So the ownership was less than forthright. Management was just fine. So it wasn't really a management issue, which makes it salvageable. But golly gee whiz, you had a watch list, right? And if you don't have a watch list, what an interesting thing to learn. It's like, well, you had a watch list, and I don't really run across watch lists a lot. And when we do due diligence, we look at, when are these customers going to, so we stack them. So we have one pivot table on customer information that's about when are these customers supposed to renew? And so here's all the ones that we usually run them by shortest to longest. So all the people that, they just renewed whatever year contract they renewed. Well, then we don't have to really worry. We hope I'm changing that thinking, but we don't have to worry about these guys for a while, right? Although I'm changing that thinking a lot, but here's the ones that they're going to renew in the next couple of months. I'm going to this year they're going to renew in let's say it's April of 26. Time flies, but it's April 26. So there's the guys that are going to renew this year in 26. There's the guys going to renew between now and the end of, let's say, third quarter. Maybe there's some second quarter renewals, right? So you sort of stack them as youngest to oldest or shortest to longest in terms of the timing, and then what do you do about it? Are they getting the appropriate communications they need to do? Is somebody working them from the farming crew, from the sales crew, from the sales farmer people, or from however your company handles customers, generally speaking? Is that being handled properly? Are you doing a good job? And is there any risk to those customers leaving, even if you're not for sale at all? If you're not even thinking about selling, that's your lifeblood. It's your money. It's how you pay the bills. It's how you pay your employees. And so having everybody invested in making sure that customer relationship is as solid as it could possibly be, and that you see it coming, that you know what's going on, so you can properly plan how to run your business, because that's where I think a lot of people lose money that they could be making for profit. If assuming you're a for-profit business, which most businesses are, instead of some of the philanthropic businesses we see some days. But that thinking is really paramount to how you run your company. And do you have to make staffing changes? Because people usually don't do that. They bet that they're gonna sell their way out of it, so to speak. We see all kinds of stuff like that that's related to customers. But the single most important valuable asset you have is not the customer contracts; it's the customer relationships. And if you see stuff springing a leak, if you don't have a watch list, I think you should have one. The more I think about it, the more I've thought about it. Boy, golly gee whiz, that's a brand new question we're asking people, by the way, for sure. That's in our lexicon now. So hey, do you have a watch list? Huh? Well, tell me about your customers. Well, they all love us, really. So just stuff to think about. This is Cogent Conversations.